They tore down my gate while I was out of town for 2 days, and when I came back, there were shiny metal HOA gates where my family's driveway used to be. No warning, no call, not even a note. Just a keypad I didn't have the code to, guarding the road I legally own. I was practically raised on that land, even if I didn't sleep there full time until way later. That house, the road, the dock, the trees that lean a little too far over the water, they're not just landmarks to me. They're stitched into my life like scar tissue. My grandfather, Thomas Kern, built that house back when the lake was just another quiet spot on the map, before the fancy developers and wine moms with matching labradoodles showed up. There was nothing out here back then but woods, deer, and dirt. You couldn't even get a clean line on the lot unless you cleared it yourself. And that's exactly what he did. He cleared it by hand, tree by tree, hauled lumber in a borrowed truck, dug the foundation with help from 2 retired Navy buddies who owed him a favor and brought their own shovels. It took him months. He didn't complain once, or if he did, he kept it to himself, the way real people used to. The house he built wasn't big. 1 story, deep porch, pitched roof, fieldstone chimney, and walls thick enough to take a punch from a hurricane. He put the kitchen window right where it caught the sunrise every morning and set the living room so it faced the lake in the afternoon. When I was a kid, he'd make me sit quiet with him on the porch after dinner, just to listen. That's all. Just listen to the frogs, the creak of the dock, the nothing. You learn a lot about a man when he teaches you to be still. The road, Derikizamru, that was the other thing he built. There weren't any public roads out that way back then. Just the highway, a gravel turnoff, and a mess of forest in between. So he carved his own path through it, 1 load of crushed rock at a time. About 400 meters of private road, winding through pines and low brush until it opened up to the lake. It wasn't fancy, no paving, no curbs, just his road, plain and simple. Hours. Years later, when developers came sniffing around the lakefront, he didn't push back. He wasn't that kind of guy. He figured let people live where they want, long as they didn't try to change the rules for everyone else. And to be fair, the original developer was respectful. He knew the only way into the new lots was through our road, and he didn't try to strong-arm anything. They sat down together, him and my granddad, at our old picnic table under the cedar, drank lemonade, signed some papers. My grandfather agreed to grant permanent access to the road in exchange for a yearly maintenance fee. Not a fortune, just enough to pay for gravel, clearing snow, keeping things tidy. It was never about money, it was about respect. That agreement was filed, stamped, and notarized, legal as it gets. He even installed a proper gate at the entrance where the road met the county route, just a plain iron schlagbaum with a mechanical lock. He gave copies of the key to the HOA, and that was it. Open and shut. They used the road. We maintained it. Everyone was happy, for a while. After he died, nobody else in the family wanted the house. Too remote, too rustic, too much work. But I did. Maybe it was because I'd spent so many summers there helping him clean fish, chop firewood, or patch up the roof with duct tape and good intentions. Or maybe it was because I just couldn't picture anyone else living in his space. His fingerprints were in the nail heads and floorboards. Letting it go felt wrong. So I moved in. Not all at once. I still had a life in the city back then, but little by little. I'd drive out on weekends, fix what needed fixing, and by the end of that first year, I was staying longer and longer. The house needed work, sure, pipes, wiring, the roof. Hell, even the squirrels were paying rent by the time I got serious about evicting them, but it was worth it. The road was still solid. I kept up the gravel, pulled the weeds back, trimmed the trees so they didn't scratch the truck. And the view? Same as ever. Wide blue lake, quiet mornings, loons calling before sunrise like nothing in the world had changed. I set up my shop out there too. Built a shed by the shoreline and started fixing up boat covers, dock pads, and winter tarps. It's quiet work, but it pays the bills. People like stuff made by hand, at least the ones who still understand what that means. Over the years, the neighborhood down the lake started filling in. Big houses, clean lines, HOA newsletters, landscapers that showed up like clockwork. That was fine by me. I nodded to neighbors when they passed, fixed their awnings when they asked, kept to myself otherwise. I never joined their HOA, never had to. Our land predates it. We weren't inside their borders. The road? Still mine. They just used it by agreement. Sometimes Karen, the new HOA president, would pass by in her Lexus, slow down a little near my shop, and keep going without waving. That was new. The old folks at least waved. But I didn't pay much attention. I figured let her think whatever she wants. I'm not in her kingdom. I'm just the guy at the end of the road where the pavement stops and real land begins. And honestly, I liked it that way. Until they decided I didn't get a choice anymore. The first time I felt that itch at the back of my neck, the kind that tells you something isn't right, even if nobody's said it out loud yet, was the morning I found the sign. I was heading out early, had to deliver a canvas cover to a guy over near Fox Hollow. Just another job, nothing special. The sun was barely up, road was still damp from the night before, and I had my coffee mug in one hand while unlocking the old Schlagbaum gate with the other. That's when I saw it. Bolted right into the upright post, crisp and freshly printed, was a rectangular aluminum sign, clean edges, no rust, like it hadn't been up for more than a day. White background, black letters, real official looking, the kind of thing you'd see on a construction site or a government fence. HOA members only, trespassers will be reported. It stopped me cold. I stood there for a second just looking at it, coffee in midair. At first, my brain was trying to make it make sense. Maybe it was meant for somewhere else. Maybe one of the contractors from down the lake screwed up and mounted it on the wrong post. Maybe Karen ordered a bunch of signs and gave vague instructions and one of her clipboard guys got confused. But no, that was wishful thinking. The screws were clean and perfectly flush with the wood. Whoever installed it took their time. It was centered, level. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. I opened the gate like I always did, creaking hinges and all, and just stood there staring at the thing. The absurdity of it. On my own damn road, one that we've owned for decades, that I maintain with my own time and money, someone had the balls to hang a sign warning me not to trespass. So I took it down. Quietly. I didn't near throw a fit, didn't call anyone, didn't stomp over to Karen's glass palace at the end of the loop road. Just grabbed my drill from the garage, backed the screws out, and dropped the sign in the corner next to the busted kayak I keep meaning to fix. And that was gonna be it. I figured it was a harmless overreach. A misunderstanding, maybe. Maybe someone got overzealous, or maybe Karen was trying to mark the road for delivery drivers or landscaping crews. It wasn't worth picking a fight over a piece of metal. Not yet. But then I ran into Sam. He's one of the more reasonable ones in the HOA, lives 2 houses up the slope, drives a Tacoma that's always dusty no matter how clean the neighborhood is. He was out walking his dog, some kind of mutt with too much energy. And I saw him wave as I was coming back from the mailbox. We ended up chatting near the split in the road where my turnoff meets the HOA loop. Small talk first. Weather, lake levels, the usual, but then he kinda scratched his neck and leaned in a little, like he was about to say something he shouldn't. "Hey, just so you know," he said, "Karen brought up the road at the HOA meeting the other day." I asked what she said, trying to keep my voice casual. He shifted from foot to foot. "She didn't name you directly, but it was pretty clear. She said there are still private owners resisting integration and that it's time we start moving toward a unified access plan for the shoreline. She's been calling it an inevitable transition." I blinked. Transition to what? He shrugged. "I think she means the road. Wants to bring it under HOA control permanently. Said it's inefficient for the community to pay someone for access when the community maintains the quality of life out here." I could feel something hot coil in my gut. Not full-on anger yet, but that low-grade pressure you get when someone talks about your stuff like it's already theirs. Sam must have seen the look on my face because he lifted both hands real fast. "I'm just telling you what I heard, man. I don't agree with her. I know the deal your grandfather made. I just figured you'd want a heads up." I nodded, thanked him, and we went our separate ways. Back at the house, I pulled the sign back out of the garage and stared at it for a while. Ran my fingers over the lettering. Clean, sharp, professionally made. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the metal filing cabinet in the corner of the shop and dug out the folder marked Road Access, 1994. It still had the original agreement, the notarized copy, the county maps, even a Polaroid of my grandfather shaking hands with the old developer, both of them smiling like they'd just closed a deal between decent people. I read through every page like it was the first time. They weren't supposed to change a thing without written permission. Not the access point, not the surface, not even the name on the mailbox. And yet, they had. They'd put up a sign that didn't belong, spoken like they already owned it, talked about transition like I wasn't part of the equation. It was small, a metal sign, 4 screws and some laminated words. But it wasn't nothing. It was the opening move, and I had a feeling the next one wouldn't be so polite. After the sign, things went quiet for a little while. Too quiet. You ever get that feeling like you're being watched, but not in the creepy movie sense, more like someone's monitoring the situation, waiting to see if you'll push back or just roll over? That's exactly what it felt like. I kept to my routine, worked on orders, mowed the grass, swept the gravel where the pine cones pile up. From the outside, nothing had changed. But every time I walked down to the road or heard an engine on the loop above me, I'd catch myself glancing around like a dog that just got kicked. Then came the truck. I was in the shop, working on a vinyl cover for a pontoon when I heard the rumble, not just a car passing, but something heavier. I walked out to the tree line, and sure enough, one of those HOA contractor trucks was parked halfway across my road, not on the HOA loop, not near the cul-de-sac, on my road. Two guys in neon vests were unloading some kind of landscaping equipment and orange cones like they were prepping for a municipal project. I walked up slow, not aggressive, just confused. They weren't familiar, not any of the regulars I'd seen before. "Hey fellas," I said, "you sure you're in the right spot?" The older one looked at a clipboard, didn't even make eye contact. "Work order says roadside drainage per HOA directive." I nodded. "Right. Thing is, this road's not HOA." Now he looked up. Not surprised, not apologetic, just annoyed. "You'll have to take it up with your board." "I'm not on a board." He blinked. "Then talk to Karen." And just like that, they kept working, dragging out flags, digging at the shoulder, and setting cones in both directions like they owned the damn ground. They didn't ask to cross onto my land, didn't offer any explanation. I didn't yell, didn't threaten. I just walked back to the house and took pictures of everything, their plates, the equipment, where they'd started cutting into the edge of the ditch line. By the time they left, the shoulder of the road was all torn up. My drainage ditch, the one I dug and maintained for 15 years, was full of loose soil and tire ruts. 2 days later, my internet went out. I called the provider. They said a contractor had been doing routine trenching in the area and may have hit a line. When I asked who requested the work, the guy on the phone hesitated, then told me it came from community access upgrades requested by the HOA. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly stupid I couldn't even be mad at first. Except I was furious. I called Karen, straight to voicemail, left a message, nothing. Then, like clockwork, a letter showed up in my mailbox, printed on HOA letterhead, sealed in a crisp, white envelope. To whom it may concern. Like they didn't even have the guts to write my name. The letter said my road had become structurally integrated with the HOA maintenance zone due to shared use enhancements funded by the HOA's infrastructure budget. It included phrases like default assumption of stewardship, redundant control structures, and invitation to harmonize usage terms. Which translated into English meant, "We did some minor work without your permission, and now we're pretending we own the damn road." There was also a line at the end that said, "To facilitate community access, the HOA may consider transitioning ownership under unified terms. Please contact us within 14 days if you would like to volunteer for review." Volunteer, for review, like they were doing me a favor. I brought the letter into the house, laid it flat on the kitchen table, and just stared at it for a long while. That quiet fury you get when someone slaps you in the face but pretends it was a handshake. That's what I felt. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I waited. And that's when they sent the second letter. This one wasn't polite. It accused me of operating a non-compliant structure adjacent to community recreation zones. That's what they called my shop. Apparently, Karen had received aesthetic complaints about the visibility of my workspace from the lakefront path, a path, I should mention, that wasn't supposed to exist in the first place. She claimed it disrupted the natural harmony of the shoreline environment. Her words. Natural harmony. I've got a plain wooden shop stained to match the tree line, tucked into the curve of the hill like it was grown there. Meanwhile, 3 of her neighbors have fire pits built out of glass tile and LED lights that pulse with their Spotify playlists. But sure, I was the problem. And then came the kicker. One evening, I got a call from a guy I used to do repairs for. A contractor, older guy, retired Navy, knows how to mind his business. He said he overheard a conversation while working on a deck 2 streets over. Karen was talking to someone, a lawyer maybe, and she said something like, "The road is basically public now, he just doesn't know it yet." That was it. That sentence hit me harder than the letters, harder than the cones or the trench, because that wasn't a mistake. That wasn't crossed wires or policy jargon. That was intent. She was coming for it. The road. My road. The one my grandfather built by hand, one shovel at a time. The one I maintained in the dead of winter with a busted snowplow and a bag of rock salt from the feed store. The one that ran straight through my childhood and into the life I built for myself. She was already calling it hers. And I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. The first thing I tried was the polite route. I figured maybe this was all just Karen getting a little too bold with her new HOA power, and if I sat down with the right person in town, we could clear it up. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted to be left alone, same as always. So I drove down to the county office to speak with someone in land records. Got myself a little paper number and waited in one of those lobbies where the fluorescent lights buzz loud enough to make your molars itch. Finally, a guy named Jeff called me in. He had that tired, long-winded kind of politeness people in government offices get when they've had to explain the same basic thing for 20 years straight. I brought all the paperwork, the original road agreement, the land plat, tax filings, proof of ownership, even a notarized maintenance log from a few years back. Jeff looked everything over and nodded like, yeah, okay, this is solid. I asked him flat out if the HOA had any legal claim to my road. He tapped his pen a few times before answering. Well, based on what you've shown me, no, but... And that but felt like someone quietly locking a door behind me. But if they've submitted infrastructure improvements tied to community benefit, and if the county accepted them into the permit system, then there might be a procedural argument. You'll probably have to get a land use attorney involved. We can't arbitrate ownership without a court ruling. Translation: this is going to take time and money, and nobody wants to stick their neck out. Still, he made a note in their system that a formal inquiry had been filed. That was something, at least. I left with a copy of the acknowledgement form, folded it in half, and stuck it in the glove box. It felt like trying to tape up a cracked dam with a sticky note, but it was better than nothing. Next, I tried contacting Karen directly. Again, left another message on her office line, still no response. So I wrote a letter, printed, signed, certified mail with return receipt. Laid it all out. History of the road, legal documentation, prior agreements, and a clear notice that I had not and would not be relinquishing ownership or access rights. I even kept it civil. No sarcasm, no threats. Just the facts. A week later, I got a reply. This time, it was a form letter, not even signed by hand. It said the HOA had reviewed my concerns and considered the matter settled under community integration protocols. Whatever the hell that means. Then came the real insult. I drove into town to grab some supplies, and when I came back, there was a neon orange violation slip stuck between the slats of my front gate. HOA citation. Said I was operating a non-compliant storage facility within sight of a public shoreline. They meant my shop. Again, I didn't even know they had the authority to issue something like that, especially to someone not in their jurisdiction, but it was formatted to look official, same font and design as county citations, same wording. Just enough to make the average person think they had teeth. And that's when I started hearing whispers. I'd stop in at the hardware store or the marina supply, and folks would ask me if I was okay. Not in the polite, casual way, in the way people talk when they've seen your name mentioned in a community meeting you weren't invited to. One guy, Mike, owns the bait shop, said Karen's been calling me uncooperative and disruptive. Told the HOA board I was refusing to let emergency services through the road, even though I've never once blocked access to anyone. Not once. That was the moment it all started to feel familiar. Not the situation, the tone of it, that quiet, calculated pressure, like someone slowly turning the temperature up in the room, just to see how long you'll sit in it before you sweat. I went back to the county, this time to the zoning department. Showed them the violation notice. The lady at the desk looked at it, furrowed her brow, and told me straight up, "This doesn't come from us. We don't use this formatting. It's not an official citation." I asked her what I was supposed to do. She gave me a tired smile, the kind that says, "You're not the first person to walk in here with this exact problem. Technically," she said, "you could file a cease and desist or a civil complaint, but you'll probably need a lawyer." And just like that, it was official. This wasn't just some HOA nonsense bleeding into my mailbox. It was becoming a legal siege. I was going to have to fight it. But first, I had to find out exactly what they'd already done behind my back. I don't know if you've ever dug through municipal records, but it's like crawling through a swamp in the dark while someone reads legal disclaimers at you. Half the stuff is digitized, half of it's still in some metal drawer from the 80s, and most of the people working there are just trying to make it to lunch without losing their minds. But I got lucky. Well, no, lucky isn't the word. Let's call it connected. There's a guy I know named Curtis. We went to the same high school, though he was 2 years ahead of me. Bit of a loner back then, obsessed with maps and trains and weird local trivia. Never really fit in. But now? He's the assistant records clerk for the county land use office. The kind of job that sounds boring until you realize it gives you access to everything. Plats, filings, permit histories, zoning requests, the whole machine. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I figured what the hell. I shot him a message and asked if he could help me look up any recent filings tied to my parcel or the road itself, just to see if anything sketchy had been slipped through without proper notice. He called me back that afternoon. Didn't even say hello. "You're not gonna like this," he said. And brother, he wasn't wrong. Turns out there was a document submitted to the county planning board marked as a voluntary transfer of easement. Said that the private road, my road, was now under shared jurisdiction of the HOA for community ingress and maintenance purposes. Stamped, logged, recorded. Looked official as hell. But here's the kicker. The document included a signature. My name. My signature. Only, I never signed a damn thing. I drove straight to the office and met Curtis at the front desk. He had the printout waiting. I looked at the signature and sure, it looked like mine at a glance, but only at a glance. The slant was wrong. The spacing was tight, like someone had copied it from memory instead of actually writing it. No hesitation in the strokes. Too clean. Curtis handed me a magnifier. "We scanned the original? Want to see something fun?" He flipped to the metadata printout. The form had been submitted by someone logged in under a contractor access code, one registered to Brent Decker. That oily lawyer who shows up to every HOA meeting in a button-down 3 sizes too tight, always hovering near Karen like a vulture at a picnic. Brent wasn't just advising them, he was filing paperwork on their behalf, and apparently he wasn't too concerned about forging my name to do it. That's when everything clicked into place. The sign, the trenching, the letters, the sudden citations, the cold shoulder from the town offices. They weren't just pushing their luck, they were building a paper trail, a false one, trying to make it look like I had handed them the road, like I'd already agreed and was now just being difficult for sport. Curtis leaned in close. "This never hit your mailbox because it was submitted as part of a multi-parcel integration. They buried it in a batch with 5 other routine filings. No one looked twice." I couldn't even speak for a second. My mouth was dry. My heart was thudding, but not from panic, more like this heavy, slow boil of disbelief. You spend your whole life thinking there are lines people won't cross. You learn, real quick, how wrong that is. Curtis reached under the desk and handed me a photocopy of the original agreement my grandfather signed with the developers back in the day. He'd pulled it from storage. I hadn't seen it in years. It was yellowed, fraying at the edges, but there it was, his signature and the clause clear as daylight. No changes to access, ownership, or usage may be enacted without explicit written consent of the Kern family or its legal successor. I sat there staring at those words like they were etched in stone. And suddenly, I wasn't just some guy fighting off an annoying HOA anymore. I was the legal owner of the road. I was the only person who could approve a transfer, and someone had just committed fraud to try and rip it out from under me. This wasn't about being polite anymore. It was time to load the paperwork and go to war. I drove home from the county office in complete silence. No music, no radio, not even the window cracked. Just me gripping the wheel tighter than I should have, replaying Curtis's voice over and over in my head. "Your name's on it, but you didn't sign it." I kept seeing the signature in my mind, the way it almost looked right, the way Brent must have studied it, maybe traced it, maybe practiced it over and over on a legal pad before deciding it was close enough to slip past a sleepy clerk at the recorder's office. Just the thought of it made my stomach twist. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I stood at the top of the drive, looking down the gravel stretch of road, my road, and just stared. I don't know how long I stood there. 10 minutes? 20? Felt like forever. Eventually, I walked into the shop, cleared off the workbench, and pulled down the old tin lockbox where I kept every legal document I'd ever cared about. The road agreement, the plat map, a copy of my deed, the maintenance receipts I'd kept like a weirdo all these years, my grandfather's signature, crisp and old school, right beside the original developer's initials. And I laid it all out. All of it. Then I opened my laptop, plugged it in, and started Googling. First search, HOA lawyer, fraud private road. Then, HOA forged easement name. Then, how to sue HOA for forged transfer. The answers were all over the place. Some of them sounded dramatic, others were too vague to be useful. But a pattern started to show up, a certain kind of lawyer, not just real estate, not just civil litigation. There's a niche field apparently for people who specialize in HOA overreach, whole firms dedicated to untangling neighborhood politics gone sideways. I found a guy 2 counties over. Reviews said he was a bulldog, used to work in state-level land dispute arbitration, and didn't like losing. His name was Jack Hanley. Just reading his name made me feel better, like I had backup coming. I emailed him that night, short and direct, attached copies of the forged easement, the original agreement, photos of the trenching, the letters, everything I had. I hit send and went to bed without much hope, to be honest. But he called the next morning. Not his assistant, not a paralegal. Him. His voice was calm, direct, and a little amused, like he'd seen this movie before. I barely got a sentence in before he said, "This is forgery, plain and simple. You're sitting on a nuclear warhead, Elias. And they just handed you the launch codes." We talked for over an hour. He asked questions, lots of them. When did the original deal happen? Did I ever receive any kind of waiver to sign? Had I responded to their citations? Did I have any witnesses, neighbors, written correspondence? I gave him everything I could remember. Told him about the sign, the fake violation, the internet line they tore up, the way Karen was already bragging like she owned the place. By the end of the call, he said, "All right. First thing we do, cease and desist. We file it today. Then we prepare a civil suit for fraud, interference with private property, and unauthorized use. We'll request an injunction to block them from using the road entirely until this is resolved." I asked him how long it would take. "Longer than you want," he said, "but faster than they're expecting." Then came the second part, the part I hadn't really considered until he brought it up. He wanted to go public. "These people operate in the shadows," he said. "They count on silence. You shine a light, and suddenly everyone gets real careful. You said they forged a signature? Good. That's not just civil. That's criminal. We bring that to the local paper, maybe a regional reporter. You're not just some guy yelling about his driveway anymore. You're the guy they tried to erase." It felt dramatic. I mean, I fix boat covers, I don't call press conferences, but he had a point. Up until now, they'd been working quietly, moving pieces behind the scenes, waiting for me to roll over. So I said yes. He got the paperwork rolling, sent a courier with the first cease and desist by the end of the day, had a copy delivered to the HOA mailbox and one personally served to Karen at her door, which, from what I heard, was the highlight of her afternoon. Apparently, she answered in a tennis skirt and called the guy "young man" like she was in a soap opera. I also started documenting everything: daily logs, time-stamped photos, call records. I even bought a little GoPro and mounted it to the gate post facing the road, not because I thought they'd come back and start digging again, but because it felt like the first thing I'd done in weeks that gave me any control back. I was done being polite, done assuming this was just going to go away. They'd forged my name, tried to steal land my grandfather had built with his own hands. Now they were going to have to explain that, to a judge, to the county, and to anyone else who was watching. Because I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. The first real shot I fired wasn't in a courtroom. It was in the form of a PDF file attached to an email with a subject line that read, "Urgent, road access dispute, public interest." Jack helped me write it. He had a way of making legal language sound like you were explaining it to your neighbor over a cup of coffee, except your neighbor happened to be the editor of the local paper. We included everything: the forged signature, the permit filings, the trenching, the letters, the cease and desist, and even a screenshot of the original agreement with my grandfather's name on it. A reporter named Dana called me back 2 days later. She worked for a small regional outlet that mostly covered county politics and property issues. She sounded cautious at first, like she'd heard one too many petty fence disputes turn into shouting matches about sovereign land and homemade legal theories. But once I laid it out for her, the decades-old agreement, the forged transfer, the fact that I'd been cut off from my own house, she went real quiet. "Wait," she said, "you're telling me they built a gate on your private road and filed fake paperwork to take it?" "Pretty much," I said, "and now they're pretending I'm the problem." A few days later, her article went live. Lakefront HOA accused of forging access rights to private road. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, just facts, but it made waves, enough of them. I started getting calls. First from a few old neighbors I hadn't heard from in years. Then from some folks I didn't know at all, people who'd had run-ins with their own HOAs, people who wanted to share advice or just say, "Don't give up." One guy emailed me scans of legal language from his own easement case downstate, said it might help. Another offered to let me borrow his portable generator in case they tried to cut my power next. And then something unexpected happened. A few of the residents from the HOA, the same ones who used to wave without smiling or just pretend not to see me, started reaching out. Quietly. Off the record, one woman named Rachel said she'd always thought something was off about the way Karen ran things. Another guy, Mitch, lived 3 doors down from her, said he remembered hearing Karen talk about phasing out private holdouts at a board meeting, but he hadn't realized she meant me. And then came the real crack in their wall, the security footage. See, that GoPro I mounted at the gate? It wasn't just sitting there, it had been recording, constantly. And a week after the cease and desist went out, Brent himself came back. Not a contractor, not a worker. Brent. He pulled up in his black SUV, stepped out wearing a polo shirt and sunglasses, and walked right up to the gate. Stood there for a minute, looking around like he wasn't sure if anyone was watching. Then he leaned down, took out a tape measure, and started taking notes. The best part? At one point, he took a photo of the post. The same post where the original Schlagbaum had been, the one they ripped out. Then he looked straight up into the lens of the GoPro, didn't even flinch, and walked back to his car like nothing happened. I sent that clip straight to Jack. He laughed. "We're gonna need popcorn for this." We filed for an injunction to stop all HOA activity on the road, permanently until the fraud case was resolved. Jack sent a copy of the footage to the judge handling our civil complaint, along with a statement explaining that not only had the HOA acted without legal authority, but their counsel had personally returned to the scene in defiance of a formal notice. And the cherry on top? Jack filed a separate motion requesting criminal charges for document forgery. Suddenly, everything changed. Karen stopped answering calls, not just mine, but the county's too. Brent's name disappeared from the HOA's official website, and at the next HOA meeting, which to be clear I still wasn't invited to, a few residents walked out halfway through. Rachel later told me that Karen tried to paint the whole thing as a misunderstanding, said I'd changed my mind about cooperating. But the story was already out there. You can't talk your way around a signature you faked. A week later, I drove into town to drop off some paperwork. When I came back, there was a new sign taped to the inside of my mailbox. No envelope, just paper and tape. It said, "Some of us never agreed with her. Keep fighting. No name, no return address, just that." And that's when I realized this wasn't just me anymore. I wasn't the weird guy at the edge of the lake with an old house and a shop in the trees. I was the one who finally said no, the one who stood up. And the quiet ones, they'd been waiting for someone like that. I didn't plan on being there for the hearing. Jack said I didn't need to come. It was just a preliminary motion to confirm the injunction, and he figured it'd be cleaner if I stayed out of the room. Keep the focus on the facts, not the feelings. But I went anyway. Call it curiosity. Or maybe I just wanted to see Karen's face when it all hit the fan. The hearing was in one of those small courthouse rooms that smells like dry paper and old carpet. Half a dozen pew-style benches in the back, tile floor that echoed too much, a judge who looked like she'd been doing this long enough to spot bullshit from a mile away. Karen showed up in a beige blazer and pearls like she was headed to brunch, not a legal proceeding. Brent wasn't with her. Jack was already there when I walked in, calm as ever, flipping through his notes like it was just another Tuesday. When he saw me, he gave the smallest nod, the kind that says, "Watch this." The judge asked some opening questions, and Jack laid it all out. The forged document, the false easement, the footage of Brent measuring my property after we'd served them. He spoke clearly, like he wasn't trying to win the room, just explain what was already obvious. Karen, on the other hand, tried to spin it. She stood and gave this weird, overly rehearsed speech about community harmony and shared access and how the road was already functionally integrated and that Mr. Kern's resistance had made normal administrative updates unnecessarily difficult. The judge blinked at her once, then asked, "Did Mr. Kern sign this document?" Karen hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Then came the moment that shut the whole thing down. Jack handed the judge a folder with 2 sheets inside. One was the fake easement with my forged signature. The other was an affidavit from Curtis, the county records guy, confirming the login credentials used to file it belonged to Brent Decker, and that no verification or in-person confirmation was ever made by me. The judge read both pages slowly. When she looked back up, her face was blank. "This signature," she said, tapping the paper, "isn't Mr. Kern's?" "No, Your Honor," Jack said, "and we are prepared to submit handwriting samples if needed." Karen opened her mouth, probably to pivot to something vague and distracting, but the judge cut her off. "I'm issuing a temporary injunction effective immediately," she said. "No further work, development, or access control may be executed by the HOA on Mr. Kern's property. Additionally, we'll be referring this matter for criminal review related to the alleged forgery." That word, criminal, hung in the air like a thunderclap. Karen sat down like someone had pulled her batteries out, just folded into the seat with her mouth still slightly open. For the first time since this whole thing started, she didn't have a smile, or a plan, or a speech. Later in the hallway, Jack handed me a copy of the injunction order and clapped me on the shoulder. "You're not done yet," he said, "but you just won the first round." It didn't take long for the news to spread. The local paper ran a follow-up with the headline, "HOA President Accused of Forgery in Private Road Dispute." They even used a still frame from the GoPro video, Brent with the tape measure, frozen mid-step, caught red-handed. The comment section lit up. People shared it across neighborhood groups and local Facebook pages. Even folks outside the county started chiming in. Then came the fallout. A special HOA board meeting was called. Not in the usual clubhouse, but at a neutral location. Apparently, someone had vandalized the bulletin board outside Karen's house with a handwritten sign that just said, "This isn't your kingdom." Rachel, the woman who'd reached out to me weeks ago, texted me a play-by-play. Karen tried to open the meeting like nothing had happened. Talked about landscaping and pool maintenance. Brent was a no-show, but then someone, Mitch, I think, stood up and asked about the court case. She tried to dodge it, said it was being handled privately. That's when Rachel handed him a copy of the article. Loudly. The room turned. One by one, people started speaking. Not yelling, just calmly stating facts. That they didn't agree with what had happened. That they never saw a vote on the road. That they were embarrassed, frankly, by how this was all playing out. Somebody called for a motion to remove Karen from the board, and for once, no one tried to stop it. She was voted out, right there, no delay. A new interim president was named, some older guy who looked like he'd rather be fishing. He promised to review every pending project, every budget item, and most importantly, to reinstate the original access agreement with me. That same night, Brent's law firm issued a statement saying he'd been placed on temporary leave pending an internal investigation, which is legal speak for "don't call us, we're pretending we don't know him." And just like that, the tide turned. Not fast, not dramatic, but sure and steady, like the lake after a storm, when the wind finally dies and the ripples start to smooth out. It took a while for everything to settle. Court stuff moves slow, even when you've clearly been wronged. But eventually, the noise died down. Karen was out. Brent disappeared from the picture entirely. Nobody ever told me if he got charged, but let's just say he hasn't been seen measuring anything since. The road? It's still mine. Always was. Only now there's a notarized reaffirmation signed by the new HOA board, filed with the county, explicitly stating that they acknowledge and respect my ownership and access terms. Jack made sure of it. He even framed a copy and mailed it to me with a note that just said, "Hang it near the gate." I didn't frame it. Felt a little too theatrical. But I did take down the GoPro. Didn't feel like I needed eyes on the entrance anymore. Some mornings I still glance that way, just out of habit, like I expect another truck to show up uninvited. But all I see is gravel, trees, and sunlight slanting through the pines. Funny thing is, people around here wave again, even the ones who stayed quiet before. Mitch stopped by with a six-pack and a nervous laugh. Rachel brought cookies like it was a peace offering. No one said sorry outright, but I could see it in their faces. The awkward respect, the "yeah, you were right" look that doesn't come easy for people who once thought you were just being difficult. The HOA reinstated the old access agreement, payments and all. Not a huge amount, just enough to cover winter upkeep and occasional gravel, same as it's always been. I deposited the first check without ceremony and went right back to patching a canvas top for a guy's pontoon. I didn't rebuild the old schlagbaum either. Instead, I put in a new wooden gate, handmade, wide and clean, with iron hinges and a swing lock. Nothing fancy, but solid. Feels like mine. And I carved a small plaque into the crossbeam. Not some angry statement or warning. Just 3 words. Private, still standing. That's all I needed to say. And life? It went on. I still work down by the water, still fix boats, still sip coffee on the porch when the lake's quiet and the wind hasn't picked up yet. Nothing grand or dramatic, no speeches, no victory laps, just peace. Hard-earned, slightly dented, but real. And after everything that happened, that's more than enough for me.